And so I went through all of the little folders and things that I had stored different goals, and I pulled them all into one place and had a whole week to really think about what I wanted my goals to be for next year. And that brought tremendous clarity.
You're listening to The Successful Bookkeeper with your host, Michael Palmer. Listen each week as inspiring guests share their secrets of success to help you increase your confidence, work smarter, and build a business you love. This episode of The Successful Bookkeeper is brought to you by purebookkeeping.com, the proven system to grow your bookkeeping business.
Welcome back to the Successful Bookkeeper podcast. I'm your host, Michael Palmer, and today's show is always with this guest, just an absolute delightful experience for me, and I know it is for you, the listener. Our returning guest is a great friend of the podcast and a friend of mine. She's the president of Graham Consulting and Training, Inc., which provides practice management and bookkeeping services exclusive to law firms. Nancy Gwynne-Vaughan, welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much, Michael. Always a delight to be here.
Yes, I always look forward to, when I wake up and I'm like, oh, I have a podcast episode today. Whenever you're on the list, I go, oh, this is great. This is great.
Thank you.
Yeah. And so let's jump in. It's the new year. How is it going? How is this new year going for you?
Oh, it's going. It's going. The first week, my assistant was sick. The second week, I was sick, and now we're into the third week, and I've my newly hired bookkeeper that was gonna just get us going right out the gate had to take some leave indefinitely, and then for the last couple of days, I've been in Emerge with my daughter. So kind of business as usual in a small business.
That's right. It's crazy how life just keeps on happening. No matter how much you plan and figure it all out,
right?
Life happens. And in a small business, it happens in wherever you are, life is happening, hopefully. So, but in a small business, pro and con is that you actually have the flexibility to deal with it. But when you're dealing with things, the business doesn't have you.
Right? I've been thinking this week, actually, running a small business is a little bit like having a toddler. Do you remember those days when your kids were toddlers, or have you blocked that out?
I feel like they're still toddlers. Someday I'm sure sometimes I think my wife probably thinks I'm a toddler.
But you're just frantically trying to catch up with them. They rip out all the toys in the family room, and as you're cleaning that, they're in their bedroom pulling all of the clothes out of the drawers, and you just feel like you're chasing, and then finally you catch up and you sit down with your cup of coffee and you think, no, I got this. I'm good. I can do this. And, then you go and you wake them up from their nap and they throw up all over you and you're just back on that roller coaster. And small business, it can be a bit of a roller coaster for sure.
Absolutely. Especially at times, this is one of those bumpy parts of the ride for you with all the people getting sick, staff. You've been on the podcast lots of times. We've talked about staff and comings and goings and this work and that didn't work, and people, right? People, I remember my mother in her business, when she decided to finally sell it and get out of it, it was like, I can't handle the issues that come up with people.
Right.
And it's like, it was a bistro, and so it's like, I can't come in, I'm sick, I'm not the right fit, I was good, and then I'm not good anymore. Dealing with all of these issues with people, that stacked on top of all of the other health concerns or issues that you yourself as an owner have, it's a lot. And everybody's going to have it. And I'm sure that's why the listener right now can relate to this.
Right? 100%. But on the flip side of that, actually, it was so wonderful for me when I ended up in Emerge with my daughter, just to be able to text my staff and say, sorry, I'm not in. And, the IT guy's coming, you're going to have to handle that. Don't forget to say this and this. And it was all handled. And it was amazing not to have the whole thing on my shoulders.
Yes. And you've built systems and process in your business to help you deal with some of these things. And that's the pro of having a small business like this, is you do have the ability to dictate your own schedule.
Yep.
And that's why many get into business. One of the reasons, right? More freedom. And,
more freedom. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's so funny. What you think you're getting when you get into small business is so different from what you're actually getting.
Yes. Part of that's part of the E-myth, right? It's
right.
The E-myth is that business is going to be more fun, more money, and more freedom. And for most, it's the opposite of that for a long time, until you build systems and process and actually figure the business out, and in all areas of the business, from sales and marketing to the process and the people. And there's a big chunk of it, which, again, we talk about the E-myth all the time, but if you haven't read it yet, E-myth Revisited by Michael Gerber, his very first book about building a system-driven business, is the one to read first, in my opinion. And then, of course, we have the E-myth Bookkeeper that was written by Debbie Roberts and Peter Cook, who've both been on the show. So you've all read all of that. You've done a lot of work around it. And so you have those systems. And I remember actually speaking to you in the latter part of last year. You had an issue with staff. Someone was leaving, and it's like, I've got to hire again. And so I was like, oh, and I spoke to you like 2 weeks later, and it's like, you'd hired a person. And that's because you've done it a number of times. You've got the system, you know what you're doing, you've got it all laid out for yourself. And you've taken a big chunk of the challenge out of it by having those systems in place to do that hiring. And you're getting better at picking people.
Yeah, and that's the thing about systems, is that you put your systems in place. And for me, I started with the pure bookkeeping system. That was my little roadmap. And so I didn't have to start from absolutely nothing. I took that system, but then you tweak it and you tweak it and you tweak it and you make it work for you. And yeah, that's the thing. I now have the ads. I have a little binder with all of the ads that I've put in, so I don't have to do that from scratch. And I've got the interview questions and the what do you have to do to set up an employee, and that has been so helpful. Just so helpful. And every time I do it, it's funny, you think when you're writing everything down that you've written down everything. And that goes to any system, whether that's a system for doing a reconciliation or hiring somebody. But then if you come back to it 6 months later, you realize, oh, actually, a lot of that was still in my head, and I missed these couple little steps. And so I think for hiring, that's what I have done over the course of the last few years. Each time you refine it and you refine it and you refine it, and each time it's a little bit easier.
Mm-hmm. That's right. That's right. Got a little off track because I wanted to talk about the new year and setting a tone for a successful year in our listeners' bookkeeping business. And so I'd be curious for you to share, like, what do you do at the start of a year to start to plan things out? Maybe talk a little bit about that process, whether it be like, towards the end of the previous year and then you're now in the new year. What's that process like for you?
So at the beginning of the year, I do absolutely nothing. Zero. And the reason for that is because goal setting is all done in December. Goal setting is all done in December. And also my workflow software, I use Pure Workflow, is all set up. And so all those little things that I used to have to remember at the beginning of the year, they just all pop up in my workflow. And so that piece is already done for me. But I was telling my daughter that I was going to do the podcast and that the topic was going to be goal setting. And she laughed at me and she said, "Oh, Mom, I could do that podcast for you." She says, "I'm sitting by the fire on Christmas Eve." And she was mocking me a little bit, as children do. But honestly, that is my process. Is I sit down in December. I'm a member of Mark Wickersham's Value Pricing Academy, and Mark does this amazing session at the beginning of every December on goal setting. It's one of my favorite things in the year to listen to that. And so I've adopted a lot of the things that he talks about there. And so in the beginning of December, I start thinking about what went really well this year. And, Mark suggests that you set yourself up for success by thinking of the good stuff, put yourself in a good space. And then we start, what didn't go well? Why didn't it go well? How do I want to do that differently next year? So I sort of start thinking about those things and write them down. But then I literally put myself in my favorite chair beside the Christmas tree with the fire going in my mind. And it's Christmas next year. It's Christmas Eve. I'm sitting down with my glass of wine and the tree's on and the fire's on, reflecting on the year. What do I want to feel? What do I want to be able to say about this past year? How does it feel? How do I feel? What have I done personally? What have I done to the house? What have I done in my finances? What have I done in my business? And I write it out as though that's already done. I'm really excited because we did our trip to Europe this year that we had been planning for 5 years, and my business billed X, and we have now grown our staff to this many. And just think through all of the things that I want to accomplish and how is that going to feel? How am I going to feel sitting there having accomplished that? And then I write it out, how I feel, what it looks like, and that's sort of my template for the year. And then I start thinking, okay, well, if that's where I want to be, then what things do I have to do and put in place in order to be there in a year?
Lovely.
And at that point, then I get out my little templates. I have made lots of little Google templates. I get my little Q1 Google template that has all my little, okay, here's my little slot for business. What am I going to do in Q1 for the business? What am I going to do personally? What am I going to do for the finances? And start thinking through, okay, what do I want to accomplish in Q1 to get me further down the line to sitting in that chair, feeling those things next year? And I try to be as specific as I can and make it real. And then I put that in my little binder and I try to look at that frequently. That's the key. There have been years where I write that all out and then I forget where I put it. And that is tremendously ineffective.
Right.
You have to sort of, it has to be real. You make it real for yourself. And then you keep it somewhere where you can revisit it often. And it doesn't mean those things are going to happen. Quite often they don't because something else has come up, but it gives me a starting point. And that's where we start. So we start with where we want to be in a year. How are we going to get there in Q1? I used to break it down for all 4 quarters, but I've found personally, I know a lot of people do that. Personally, I find it's better to do it 1 quarter at a time. And then weekly, I have my weekly template and I think, okay, well, this week, what am I going to focus on? And I try to look at that Mondays. Try to start the week looking at, okay, what are we going to do this week to move on the quarterly goals, which is going to move us to the annual goal.
Gotcha. It's great. I think a couple of things out of that is number one, like it sounds, it's not digital for you. You have a Google template, but you print things off. You have a binder.
Yeah, I also have a Google Doc that has sort of my master list of every project I've ever thought about wanting to tackle. So yeah, but there's something for me in the actual writing out.
That's right. And I think that's a piece of it's like writing out, but it's also when you said, oh, you forget about it. I mean, I have tons of, documents and things that just like you, it's like it disappears into the ether because it's on the laptop or an iPad or my phone. Whereas sometimes having something just physical that you can go back to is there, right? And it's on your desk, it's on the shelf, it moves around. Like I have notes and stuff from last year that they're still there, and I can pick them up, look at them, and bring them back. And I think that's the key piece. For some, that might be an improvement on the way they're doing it if they've gone to the digital side. If it's not working or things are getting lost, something to think about. Where do you store these goals and these aspirations that you have for the year? Because if you don't look at it, if you don't bring it up, it's gone. It's in the past.
Right.
Yeah.
And I used to have them all over the place. And just this past year, actually, I had 4 wisdom teeth out at the beginning of December. And I planned to be off for a week. And then I had this wild allergic reaction to something. And I was off a second week, and not sick enough that I couldn't come into the office at all, but I was definitely not going to spend any time on any client work. And so I went through all of the little folders and things that I had stored different goals, and I pulled them all into one place and had a whole week to really think about what I wanted my goals to be for next year. And that brought tremendous clarity. And I think it'd be really interesting to talk this time next year, because I had nothing else that I felt I could work on. I worked in a lot more detail on my goals for next year, and I have, as a result of that, significant clarity. That I think too is the key. Is you got to be really, really clear, and when you get clear, then you know what you're working on, and that is very, very helpful. It's not all sort of all ethereal and a great big mass. And I sort of know I have goals and they're kind of this. I have such specificity this year because I had a lot more time. And I think what came out of that for me is I really want to make that time. You know, we don't always make time for ourselves and our own business. But because I was sick, I gave myself permission to not work on client work for a whole week. Which normally I would have a little bit more trouble doing that. You know, there's pressing things that need to get done. I feel like I need to jump on that. And I think I would like to build that in to my business. Just taking that week or two to really focus on goal setting.
Beautiful. It's a great process. I love what you have that you do. It's ahead of the game, December, planning things out. And if people haven't done it this way, they could stop and take the time to do it now. There's no...
For sure.
Yeah, and the second best time would be now.
It used to be the first week in January was always my goal setting week, which was great. But doing it in December I'm finding so much better, because December is always a crazy month anyways with Christmas and all of that. And just sitting down and doing it in December gives you the ability to just hit the ground running in January. And that has been super helpful over the last few years.
Wonderful. It brings me back to when you were speaking about it, a video that I had seen. It was a nice, fresh reminder of the fact that what we think about is what we attract or create. And there's lots of different theories on this. Some people would, whether it's the reticular activation system in your brain, they call it the RAS, reticular activation system, whether it's your energy, attracting other energy, whatever the case may be, the idea being that if you're thinking thoughts, that's what makes up your experience. So if you're thinking about just work, all I'm doing is working and it's busy and I'm in my business and work, all that's going to bring and be in front of you is more of that. Whereas when you stop to think about your business, create goals, return to those goals, create that energy of why, the positive experiences of why you're doing it, you're actually filling your mind with the outcomes that you want, and that's what you'll attract or create in your life. And I think that's for me, it was a good reminder of the thoughts being a shepherd of your own thoughts is paramount to everything as a human. And if we are not a shepherd of our thoughts, the wolves will get in and sheep
Yeah,
shall go missing.
100%.
Yeah. So
100%.
that's part of what you're doing when you're doing the system that you do is you're sitting down creating this, but then you're also bringing that back. Every time you bring it back, you're resetting your thoughts and making sure that your thinking is aligned with the goals and where you're going with that.
And it gives you focus. And it's interesting. Tony Robbins does this. He does all these little videos, and I was listening to one of them a few years ago, and he talked about doing a session with a race car driver. And the race car driver was talking about, when the car goes out of control, you need to focus on where you want the car to go, not where it's going. And what Tony Robbins brought out of that was, what you're focusing on is where you're going to go. And so if you don't have something specific to focus on, then you could just end up going anywhere. You don't have a real place where you're going to go. Whereas if you've got a really specific thing that you're really focused on, you're much more likely to succeed in that because you know where you're going.
Absolutely. So great. And these are things that you're doing for your business. In the year, do you break it out by area of the business? Like for this year, what are you specifically working on? Because people might be, where am I going to work on my business? How do you make those decisions?
Right. Well, that's an interesting question. Some of it is what I want in my personal life. So, for example, last year, my billings were down significantly. And as much as I cringe when I look at my income statement for last year was a year where I really focused on doing some life stuff because coming out of COVID, we had just done so much work with all of the government applications and extra work that came out of a lot of those COVID benefits. We were just going flat out for a few years, and a lot of life stuff just got put to the side. And so last year, for one reason or another, I ended up being off about 10 weeks. And that was deliberate, and I knew my income statement was going to look the way it does. But we went on a couple of trips. It was our 25th anniversary. We went to New York with friends. We did a family trip to Florida. I got my wisdom teeth out, had some stuff for that. I did some stuff in the house. And again, that was sort of what the goal was for last year, was to do more life stuff because we had really put that off for a while. So I guess I look at what's going on in my personal life. Is there something that I need to make time for? I look at, what do I want my finances to be? What do I want my finances to look like? What do I want the profit to look like? And what do I need to do? I look at, what work do I want to do? Do I want to be grinding out bank reconciliations and data entry? Or do I want to try to work on something more interesting? And so there's those sorts of things. And then also I have to look at what is going on in my client's industry. I have a niche. I work, as you said, exclusively with the legal profession. And last year, the primary software for my clients for many, many years was a desktop software called PC Law. And that created a lot of challenges. We had to figure out how to log in remotely to each of the clients. We had to talk them into allowing us to log in remotely, and COVID helped quite a bit with that because some of our clients were fairly resistant to that. But it was a software that I was super comfortable with. I'd worked on it for decades. And suddenly last year, PC Law just completely raised their prices to the point where clients are just leaving them in droves. And that created a whole bunch of challenges for us because now all of a sudden we are no longer expert in the software that we're working on. We've got clients that have migrated to 4 or 5 different softwares. And now we had to learn a bunch of new software and we had to decide, are we going to support all the legal software or are we just going to choose some? And so that became what we had to work on.
Wow.
So I sit down at the beginning of the year and do what I think is going to be the goals for the year. Last year our goals were going to be building relationships with our clients and doing marketing. And that turned out not to be the plan at all because suddenly we had to migrate to new software. So, you make your goals, but you also have to have a little bit of flexibility depending on what's going on in your life, your business, and your clients' lives and businesses.
We talked about it in the beginning. Life is what happens when you're busy making plans.
Exactly.
And so there's uncertainty and challenges that arise, as we talked about. You're going through some of those with some health issues with your staff and your daughter and yourself, and those are always ongoing. But there's things like you said, the shift in software. It's uncertain. Where is this going? How do you handle these uncertain times and challenges that come up throughout the year?
That's a great question. I think how you handle the challenges is not just sort of based on the year. It's how you handle the challenge of being in small business. And there are a number of things that I have learned over the years about being in small business. And I started learning that from my dad. My dad was the managing partner in a small law firm. And so small business has been my life as far back as when I was a kid going into my dad's office. And over the years, he's talked about the challenges of being in small business. And it has been amazing to be able to go to my dad and when I'm in a panic because, there's just so much work or there's no work or, and just be able to talk to somebody who's been there and say, and have him say, yep, that's normal. That's small business. There's some comfort in having people that you can talk to. But in terms of handling the challenges, there are a number of things that I have learned to do over the years to at least keep some measure of sanity in all of this. One is really keeping an eye on what the trends are. In both in your industry, so in the bookkeeping industry, right now, there's just huge things going on with AI, huge things going on with technology, keeping an eye on that, keeping an eye on where things are going. Also, if you have a niche, keeping an eye on what the trends are in their businesses. So when everybody switched from PC law, that was not a surprise to me. I had seen that coming over a number of years. The speed with which it happened last year, because they just suddenly raised their price, that was a bit of surprise, but I already knew that was coming. I had seen that coming because I'd been keeping an eye on that. And so just making sure that you're not so engrossed in the work that you're doing, that you don't see what's ahead. That's a really important piece because they're not as challenging if you see them coming. There's enough things that are challenging that you don't see coming, but there are things that you can definitely keep your eye on. So keep one eye on the future, watching for the trends. That's an important piece for dealing with the challenges. The other thing is run your business. And I got really caught up in doing work when I lost a staff member a couple of years ago and really took my eye off the ball and paid a price for that. And that really taught me no matter what is happening in the work, you still have to run your business. I read this book. I actually think you recommended this book, Michael, many years ago called The Checklist Manifesto. Fabulous book. If you want to learn how to write really great checklists, it's a fantastic book. And there was a section in there on checklists for planes if something goes wrong. And because, when you're in a plane and you're flying a plane, something goes wrong, that is high pressure situation. And so the pilots have this checklist. And about 3 or 4 items down on this checklist of, check this, do this, do this, it says, fly the plane. Because you can get so engrossed in the panic of the situation that you forget to do what you're supposed to do.
Amazing.
And so I think, making sure that even when the pressure is on and the deadlines are on and things are going wrong and your staff isn't here, you still have to keep an eye on your business and run your business even. And man, that's hard. When I get stressed, I just want to jump into the work because the work needs to get done. And also it's a nice little hiding place to just be in the work and not thinking about all of the things that are going wrong and that are hard. It's a little bit comforting to just jump into the familiar. So yeah, run your business. Surround yourself with other people. That is key in small business. In my experience, is don't try to do that all alone. The more people you can get on your team. I have an amazing team. I have a tremendous business coach. Best decision I ever made when I learned about Debbie Roberts and I read that E-Myth Bookkeeper. And I learned that how Debbie expanded her business was to hire a business coach. I thought, okay, well, you know what? If Debbie Roberts succeeded by hiring a coach, I'm going to hire a coach. And I did. And phenomenal decision. I have a great IT guy. I'm pretty techie. My old IT guy used to tell me he hated when my name popped up on the screen because he knew he was actually going to have to come out to the office because I had already done the, turn it on and off and restart and the troubleshooting. But yes, I could solve a lot of my tech problems on my own. It would take days, but I could do it. But is that the best use of my time? I read this book. I can't remember the author. You might know it, Michael. It's called The Big Leap. Fabulous book. And the author talks about working in your zone of genius. And in running a small business, that's really key is, what should you be doing? There are a lot of things you could do, but where are you going to have the greatest impact in your business? And that's probably not spending 3 days trying to hook up your new printer. So we have an IT guy. We can call him. He can log in, solve most of our problems, or he can come out. I have staff. I have wonderful staff. I have an accountant who I can just call quickly if I have a question. I don't have to sit on the Canada Revenue Agency site and research the answer to every single question that I need an answer to. Interestingly, the recent addition to our team last year was we hired somebody to come in and clean the office. And that has been life-altering. Life-altering, and in a way that I can't even describe, because I used to come into the office and I think, I've got to get in here and clean the office. And it would weigh on me. And then a week would go by and the next week would go by and I'd be working and doing deadlines and it would just bother me so much. The office needs to be cleaned. And now I don't even think about that. And it gave me huge bandwidth. So create a team for yourself and community. That is vital. Find a community of other bookkeepers. I'm part of the Pure Bookkeeping community, Successful Bookkeeper community, part of the Value Pricing Academy community. And I have met so many people who do things so much better than I do and have taught me wonderful things. I'm thinking about Lisa Campbell and her A2A program. Oh my goodness, the first time I ever did her masterclass, I was so depressed because she had so many systems. And I thought I had great systems until I ran into Lisa and saw all of her systems. And then I thought, should I even be a bookkeeper because I'm so behind? And I had to wallow a little bit. But, then it made me pick myself up and really tighten up where I didn't realize I need tightening. And finding people who are ahead of where you are is so helpful in bookkeeping. There's just so much out there, so much technology now, so many different choices for workflow systems and apps and things. Find people who are really good at that and get ideas. But also the other thing that I've learned is just because it works for somebody else doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work for you in the same way, and that's okay.
That's right.
And so I remember, Lisa Campbell for a while was using ClickUp. Now she's come over to Pure Workflow, which is awesome because Pure Workflow is so much better. But I remember thinking, okay, well, Lisa Campbell's using ClickUp, so I am going to switch to ClickUp. And, I did, and I couldn't make it work. I tried and I tried, and it just did not work for me. And then I think I actually switched to Pure Workflow before Lisa did.
I think you're right. Yeah.
And Pure Workflow has been amazing for me. But now I've watched Lisa do a couple of seminars on how she uses Pure Workflow, and I don't actually use it exactly the same way. She does a lot of staff monitoring on it. I use it more for partially for CRM because I can keep so much client information in there. It's of all of the workflow systems I've ever used, that one allows me the most flexibility to keep so much information right in the workflow system, which is fabulous. But I also have a spreadsheet, and I got that idea from Kelly Parks. Kelly, I think you know Kelly. She runs the Workflow Watering Hole.
Yes.
She speaks at a lot of things, and she's also amazing. One day in the Workflow Watering Hole Facebook group, she posted a spreadsheet that she uses. And it's a spreadsheet that just shows everything in her business that needed to be done, every reconciliation. And I thought, wow, that's super cool. And so I have adopted that in addition to Pure Workflow because that works for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember the Law Society, when they used to come in and do audits, they had this software program. It was a customized software program that had everything that they had to look at in the audit. And everything that they had to fill in was highlighted in yellow. And as they filled it in, as they went through the audit, they would change the color of the square. It was like an Excel. They changed the color of the square to take out the yellow. And I thought, oh, that's so cool. And so now my Kelly Parks spreadsheet that has everything on it that anybody needs to do in our firm in a month. At the beginning of every month, my admin goes through and she turns every one of those squares yellow. And as the staff go in and they do the reconciliations, or they post the payroll journal entry or whatever they need to do, they turn the square green. And so that's actually on a Google Doc, not a spreadsheet. And the Google Doc is shared with everybody in our staff. And so all month long, people are going in there and they're turning the squares green. And at any moment, I can look at that spreadsheet and see in a second, how far are we this month? And if it's early in the month and it's all yellow, I'm good with that. If it's later in the month and there's a lot of yellow, that's where I can start getting concerned. And then I can go into Pure Workflow and I can drill down and see, okay, well, where are they on that task? But that's two fabulous ideas that I've taken and tweaked a little bit, and I've now gotten over so-and-so who's amazing does it this way, so I have to try it that way. And I think the other thing is it's so inspiring to have people who are ahead of you. And it's important to have people who are ahead of you for learning and for inspiration, but not for comparing.
That's right. That's the trick of it, is to realize that when you're in that situation and you're feeling that those are good feelings, because it's showing you where you need to go, where you want to go. If it didn't, it'd be like saying, oh, that person, look at that, they have that workflow. If you didn't care for that or want it or need it in your life, it wouldn't bother you. It's where the judging is showing you a gap, and it's the relationship you have with that gap that can be a negative relationship, or you can turn that into a positive relationship. And it's like the human
Right?
condition will be like where you went to. Oh, I'm not as good as, I'm a failure. I'm all these things. The faster you can recoil from the human condition of going there to, this is important. What's my plan? I'm going to be there. I will do these things. I will be as good as that, or whatever the case may be. It's, you're in the right place, because if you are the best, or if you are the smartest person in the room, you're limiting yourself. There's no more
Right?
growth available to you.
Yes. But also, it's important to remember, the thing that's so hard for me is when I see people who started their business so much later than I started my business. And in so few years, they're so much further ahead than I am. And I've just had to learn to say, okay, but you know what? Maybe they don't have the same challenges that you have, or maybe, they've put more work in than you have, and you've wanted to have these other things in your life, and that's okay. You go at your own pace, and in terms of compare where you are to where you used to be.
That's right.
Not where other people are. And when I thought about it, well, here I am, but where was I 10 years ago? Yeah, 10 years ago, I was still working at home with my friend who used to come in once a week and work in my basement as my staff. And I can remember I used to be driving around the town where we live thinking, oh, if I just had an office, my life would be so much different if I just had my own office.
Mm-hmm.
And, and now I have my own office, and yeah, my life is different, but now I have new goals. And I think that is part of the entrepreneurial condition, is you always have more goals than you have time or money. And when you accomplish, your big goal, there's 3 more or 10 more.
Absolutely. That's the beautiful part of it.
Right. And I remember thinking, oh, if I could just get to 6 figures, that would be the ultimate. Just hit 6 figures. And, that was my goal. That was my goal that I failed at for several years. But every year I'd get a little bit closer, and now 6 figures is way in the rear view mirror. And now there's new goals. It just which is great. Is great.
That's right.
But in terms of having challenges, I think that you're always going to have challenges, and you've got to figure out ways to meet the challenges that you have. Reading and continuing education are absolutely vital, I think, in our profession, and in meeting the challenges of small business. I have learned so much from business books. I love books on business. I find that, usually there's at least one tiny little nugget of gold that you'll find in each business book that just shifts the way you do things, makes things better, makes you think differently, and just committing to lifelong learning and committing to the fact that you're just always going to have to be shifting and changing and learning to be in small business is another vital way of meeting the challenge of being in small business.
Really is. As you were speaking about the journey, a poem came up in my mind. It reminded me of the poem, which is "The Road Not Taken," and that's by Robert Frost. So if people have not read that poem, this is a good one to read every now and then if you're an entrepreneur, because being an entrepreneur is the road, the more challenging road, the less traveled road, is the entrepreneurial road. And the end of it, to give it away, is for the author of the poem, it was, he chose to take the less traveled road, and that's what made the difference in his life. So it's like one of those things as an entrepreneur, it's not a well-traveled road. There's ups, there's downs, there's constant learning, there's constant failure and success. There's new goals. You reach one, there's comparisons. There's so much, but yet that's what makes a full life. And there's so much, for everyone that listening, you're likely one of those people that would choose the less traveled road in this situation for your life. So it's been definitely, I think it's a poem you want to read every now and then to give you a little bit of inspiration, just based on everything you've said in this episode, which is creating your road to travel this year. And who knows what will come along when you've chosen this path and the goals that you've set and aspirations that you have of where you're going to end up.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. And I think, knowing that things are going to come up and that there's going to be challenges, you could almost take the position, well, why even bother goal setting and why even bother planning, because you can't control anything anyway. But I think you have to try to at least say, this is what I want to accomplish, and sort of hold that loosely. Say, this is what I want to accomplish. But then look for the surprises. And the surprises are not all bad.
That's right.
Sometimes opportunities have come up that I haven't planned for, and they have been amazing. Absolutely amazing. And, I'm never bored.
No,
I have to say that I'm a lot of things. I'm a lot of things, and I think that anybody who's listening, who is running their own small business, I'm a lot of things. I'm overwhelmed. I'm stressed. I'm over the moon when we have success. I'm all kinds of things, but I am never bored.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, this has been fantastic, and we'll, I'm sure, have an update from you in the future. And I'm excited for our listener. I'm hoping they've gone away inspired. Maybe they already have their goals set out. If you don't, this is a perfect time to create a few and to get excited about what you're creating in your business. And for those that have created some goals and are working away, there's a little bit of something for everyone that's listening. This is a great road, being an entrepreneur. Great road to be on, great business to be in, great customers to serve and help them on their roads. And so that's what we have year by year to look forward to, which is exciting. Nancy, this has been, we had, I will say, Dave, who I know our listener hears about time to time, don't actually ever get to me. I should have Dave on the podcast one of these days. That's it just popped into my head. Maybe it's been there before, but Dave is the producer of the podcast and books all the guests and make sure there's questions to ask and where are we going with this and will our listeners like this? He is the real brains behind this whole thing. I just sit here and ask these questions and look good, but he had the most questions created for you ever that I've ever seen. I think, wait a minute, what was it? It was 25 questions.
Right. I
think Dave was hoping that we'd do 25 episodes and have the year almost punched out. But we tackled a few, and through, as we normally do, we answer a lot of them through just a conversation. And so, Nancy, it's been a great conversation with you. And I know we'll do another one in the future. So on behalf of our listener, thank you.
My pleasure, as always. It is just a delight. I am a faithful listener of your podcast, and I have learned so many things from the guests that you have had on, and it's just my pleasure to come on and share a little bit of my journey with you and your listeners.
Beautiful. Thank you, Nancy. The pleasure is all ours. And with that, we wrap another episode of the Successful Bookkeeper podcast. To learn more about today's wonderful guest and to get access to all sorts of valuable free business building resources, you can go to thesuccessfulbookkeeper.com. Until next time, goodbye.
You've been listening to The Successful Bookkeeper with Michael Palmer. For more information and to download the resources mentioned in this episode, please visit us at thesuccessfulbookkeeper.com. Thank you for listening.